Rolling with the triple C, I'ma make them bend the knee. Rolling with the triple C, don't really count the heat.
So I've accomplished a lot in my life. From becoming the youngest in history in 2008 to win an Olympic gold medal, to 2 UFC championships in the UFC. I may be an expert at protecting myself or even protecting others, but not when it comes to the internet. I'm about as dumb as a box of rocks. That is why I'm introducing today's sponsor, Aura. Aura protects you from scammers and hackers by scanning the so-called dark web, where criminals sell stolen information looking for your emails, password, and social security numbers. It alerts you fast if it finds anything, and they protect your devices from viruses, malware, spyware, and more so the bad guys don't break in. Don't get jacked, don't get hijacked, don't get your identity stolen. Be smart. Sign up now with Aura and you're gonna get 2 weeks free. Yes, I said it. 2 week free. That's all you have to do is go to aura.com/Henry Cejudo, and guess what? It's 2 weeks free. The link is in my description, or scan the QR code. Enough getting hijacked. Triple C and Aura's here to save you. So Jake Paul now transitioned from boxing to MMA. What are my thoughts? Guys, let me tell you guys something right now. I'm here to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And what Jake Paul was able to do in the sport of boxing, of mixing it up, of calling people out, of getting boxers like Amanda Serrano, getting her paid, the X, Y's, and C. I know Jake Paul, what he did for boxing is what MMA needs. And trust me, guys, I love the UFC. You know, I respect Dana White. Despite everything that's happened these last few days that has been pretty hectic for him, I respect my boss. But I also do know that the only way of things evolving and change happiness is through guys like a Jake Paul, a guy that has a following behind him, with not just MMA people, but actually casuals, because it's really the casuals who ends up putting the dollar bills in everybody's pockets. It's particularly the UFC. The 50-50 split with him and PFL, with fighters. I mean, that's appetizing. That's okay. It's only gonna allow for the PFL to be able to start leading all these other companies to maybe up the pay a little bit. I'm not saying do the 50-50 part, but it's definitely bringing in more competition, because if somehow this PFL is able to catch wind, it's only going to bring up companies like Bellator, the UFC, ONE FC. And I'm not afraid to tell the truth. Like, yeah, of course, everybody wants to get paid, including Dana wants to be paid more. The ESPN wants to be paid more. All the shareholders want to be paid more. How is it that happens? And it's guys like Jake Paul, guys that come in and really throw a wrench into whatever it is that's going on at the time. And right now, especially what happened with Dana White, this guy is stepping in. If you guys saw his promo, with the promo, they're literally lashing out at Dana White. It's like the timing. It's almost like they whipped something up like super quick. Like the marketing team came together and was like, hey, why don't we stick it to him? Why don't we get together and we come up with this promo now signed, and you're able to give me X, Y, and Z, while he's still being able to be himself, still being able to promote fights, still have the ability to box, and then now he's putting his money where his mouth is, where he's eventually going to start fighting. When I'm saying start fighting and start doing MMA. I love the idea of him, fighting first Nate Diaz in boxing, and then 6 months later, challenging him in the PFL and making it happen there too. I mean, guys, if that kid doesn't have balls, I mean, who does? A lot of you guys want to call him just this Disney kid, this YouTuber. Man, that dude comes from a wrestling background. And me as a wrestler, I'm always proud of wrestlers that are able to do it, especially guys that that, yeah, he may be a little annoying, but so is the King of Cringe, so is Henry Cejudo, so is Triple C. But the purpose that comes behind him is what I love more about Jake Paul. You see, I don't get emotional. If you get emotional, you're dumb. Like as a fighter, and a lot of fighters probably won't say this, but they actually appreciate a guy like that. You know, like I said, I respect Dana. I respect the UFC. I love the UFC. I would want to end my career there. But, you know, anything and everything this year 2023 could always be better. And I think Jake Paul is that perfect storm to come in and be like, hey, whether anything happens or there's any change or there's any up in fighter pay, he's doing something. So I think my question for all of you, instead of talking shit or bashing him, what are you doing?
So do you think coming from Nate Diaz's perspective, do you think Nate Diaz should accept that challenge where laying out the challenge, this is what Jake Paul said, first would be in boxing, 6 months later, then they would fight in PFL. Do you think that's something that Nate Diaz should accept?
100%. Nate Diaz, you're going to have two paydays. One, you're a pay-per-view king. You've done that. And I think you left the UFC for an apparent reason. I don't know. Maybe it was money. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was just you wanting to branch out and see if you can catch more. And I promise you, man, Dana White or anybody in the UFC, they ain't mad at you. They respect you, man, just as I do. But I think if you want the biggest payday with the easiest fight, that being said, not saying that Jake Paul is the easiest fight, but he is the easiest fight compared to all these other animals that are going to be ahead of you. If you do want to box or do MMA, his name is Jake Paul, and there's a pot of gold out there. I think if you're smart or I know you're smart, but I think if you're able to put things together and really become more logical, maybe you spend some more time in the ring, because it's probably more like what you're probably going to need against him. Because have you seen him? Like Jake Paul's he's got boxing skills. He does, man. He goes high, he goes low, high. Has a really good transition to making it awkward. He doesn't box like a boxer. And I think that's what makes him tricky, because I believe if he was to fight like a boxer against Anderson, I do believe Anderson Silva would have probably got that victory. But when you get an awkward guy that moves different, that hunches in and out, that's just weird, that's willing to take risk, and that necessarily doesn't have crazy knockout power, but it has knocked people out, that's what makes him dangerous. But if I was in Nate Diaz's shoes in his situation, I would 100% take him up on that. I'd box him, have the 50-50 split for boxing, and then I would fight him in the PFL cage, and then do the other 50-50 split there. I mean, you're talking about maybe you're talking about maybe Nate Diaz making anywhere between 20 to 25 million is what I estimate in my head.
Let's go predictions for each sport. In the boxing fight and in the MMA fight, Nate Diaz versus Jake Paul. Where are you leaning on both those right now?
Well, what would the weight class be, Uncle Michael?
Yeah, that is what's kind of interesting, because Jake Paul is probably naturally about 195, 185 range, and then you have Nate Diaz, who has fought, anywhere from, I believe, as low as 145 to 170 in the UFC. So I agree with you that will have to be a little bit up for discussion, but either way, I guess you could choose where the weight would be, maybe 185 in boxing, something like that. 180 maybe would be more realistic.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that's where maybe Nate could have a little more of the negotiations. I would break it down to 175 pounds. You bring it down to 175 pounds, and I see it even. It goes above 175 pounds, anywhere from 80 on above, I'm probably gonna have to favor Jake Paul. So it all depends on that situation, because you guys remember, it's not the 5 pounds, it's the recovery of after you shave off those 5 pounds. That will be the difference. So if I was in Nate Diaz's shoes, I'd say, hey, let's do a catch weight of 175. You take away 10 pounds from him, we'll see if he's still going to produce that same power. And I do believe Nate's fought at 170. You know what I mean? Give him an extra 5 pounds. I think it's great. And I think for MMA, I mean, if he beats him in boxing, and if Jake beats Nate Diaz in boxing, and Nate Diaz can't take Jake Paul down, I'm going to have to go with Jake Paul. You guys understand where I'm coming from? Because Nate Diaz doesn't kick. Nate Diaz, yeah, he knows grappling, but you also have to understand that Jake Paul is also a wrestler. And he's got decent wrestling, man. He wrestled out at, Ohio State. I'm not sure if he was a state placer or whatever, but, either way, that's more experience than what Nate has actually had. Because once you've wrestled, it's like you could lose it, but not really. You know what I mean? You just got to go back and touch up on all those small little details. I think that'll make them dangerous. So I think that being said, I think it all depends on the weight class, which is going to tell me a lot. And then it just depends on strategically. Can or will Nate Diaz like take a guy like Jake Paul down who has wrestling experience? If Jake Paul beats Nate Diaz in boxing with big gloves, and they fight MMA, you guys have to keep in mind though too is like Nate Diaz doesn't have wrestling. He's not known for taking people down. I don't think I've ever seen him go for a takedown. You know, I think Jake Paul is smart enough to just keep it on his feet, and I do believe he'll have the ability to defend Nate Diaz. It's hard to defend on that boxing match. That boxing match will tell you a lot because this is what Nate is accustomed to. So to me, that's up in the air. You know, I can't take anything away from Nate, especially the fact that Jake hasn't fought in MMA. So I think my biggest thing, in order for me to really make a decision on who's going to win, it's all going to depend on that boxing fight. So thank you guys again for watching. It means a lot to me. So you guys remember, there's more breakdowns, there's more technique, there's more tactics, and there's definitely more cringe. So make sure to subscribe and click on that button. I'm out!